There are major changes coming to the world of project delivery and productivity through artificial intelligence. This past week, the AI Seoul Summit, co-hosted by South Korea and the UK, brought together 10 countries and 16 leading global businesses. At the heart of the summit was the creation of an international network for AI safety, with the UK pledging £8.5 million, though ethical concerns remain. Our graph of the week highlights the necessity of being product-led in today's market. Elon Musk made waves at the Viva Tech, predicting a future where jobs are optional, prompting discussions on new economic models and social policies. We'll explore how ChatGPT is upending data analysis and how Teams Copilot and autonomous agents from Microsoft Build are set to transform project management. On the sustainability front, recent findings reveal mixed capabilities in operating sustainable job sites, with a notable divide in ESG compliance. Despite advancements, Microsoft reported a 30% increase in greenhouse gas emissions, raising concerns about AI's environmental impact. Finally, we'll touch on the Trump crypto story that's been making all sorts of headlines. Welcome to Project Flux, the easiest path to get smarter about AI and how it's changing project delivery and productivity. I'm James, joined by Yoshi. Let's dive in. Afternoon, Yoshi. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you, mate. The weather's grim, but hopes are still up. Everything else is positive.
Yeah, well, we've had a bank holiday, which has obviously kind of pushed this podcast back a day for those who usually get this on a Wednesday. This coming out on a Thursday this time. But yeah, it is a little bit grim. It's not exactly summer, but we've got plenty to keep ourselves amused in the meantime with what's happening. As we said, there's quite a few bits and pieces to go through this week. We're flying solo this week. It's just me and you. We no guests due to the bank holiday, but we'll have just as much fun as normal, I'm sure, going through some of these stories. So,
Dream team.
The dream team, exactly. So before we kind of dive in, well, what's kind of your big takeaway this week, Yoshi?
The big takeaway this week was actually some of the developments within Microsoft Build. I think we saw the developments from Google and OpenAI, but I think Microsoft have kind of followed suit with Google in building a lot of their AI capabilities into their softwares and also their hardware, right? They're releasing a new powerful laptop apparently, which is apparently better than Macs. But there were two things that really strike me with the Microsoft Build announcements, and it was what we'll touch on soon in the podcast, is autonomous agents and also Teams Copilot, because I think those things will be very useful for people to use within daily work, but also how they manage projects.
What's an autonomous agent for those listening?
So autonomous agent, the way that I see it, so I see it basically as a virtual worker. So we can leverage AI to do a lot of tasks and actions and kind of low value activity. The Copilot autonomous agents, it's like an extra worker. Like they become synonymous with a project or the workflow that you have. And I think you can see it as an extra person within your team. I don't want to say person because we're starting to then blur the lines between human and AI. But I think the capabilities are getting that advanced that we're starting to see an extra worker in the form of AI.
Yeah, and we're going to have to treat it exactly the same way. I was preaching to somebody earlier this week that, you know, we've got to ask questions and doubt these models and these agents just as we would do a person. Right? It makes no difference. Nothing's perfect. No human's perfect. Likewise, no AI is perfect. My big thing this week, and I've been reflecting on this for a while, and I know this is going to be a bit controversial, but how do Google keep getting it so wrong? They had another bad launch, and is there something fundamental? Have they just got bad luck with their launches, or is there some kind of fundamental problem there? Are they rushing stuff out to try and keep up and it's just not ready?
I think with most things, there's a very fine line between delivering something at the frontier or something which is something that everyone with the wow factor, but it can easily cross over the line of cringiness. And I think with Google, they've always been known to have a lot of flair with their aesthetics and being modern, but it comes across as being a corporate company trying too hard. And I think that kind of seeps down into how people perceive their products, because some of the stuff they deliver is quite good, right? But I think it's just public perception.
Yeah, but some of the, this latest model that they put out there, the AI summaries that are supposedly going to replace Google search. I mean, I've seen some absolutely comical examples of them getting things wrong. The best one was what vegetable, what fruit ends with and it just starts saying things like strawberry and lemon.
AI hallucinations. But I tell you what though, similarly with other AI models, and we're touching base to kind of the Reddit deal with OpenAI, last week's podcast. Someone actually asked a large language model, I'm not sure which one it was, how to make their pizza stickier or like stringier with the cheese. And someone on Reddit mentioned super glue. And the AI actually gave a response saying you could use super glue on your pizza. Now, I wouldn't advise that, but I'm not a medical professional.
Use non-toxic glue.
Yeah.
It got halfway to trying to be safe, but it is. Yes. We laugh about it, and we got to have a bit of a joke around these things, but it's also quite serious, right? Which leads us really nicely onto our first story, this AI Soul Summit that happened. I thought it was very weakly covered. I mean, there wasn't a lot about it in the national press. I didn't see a huge amount on the BBC or anything. I'm not sure what it was like in other parts of the world, but considering we had like 10 countries there and 16 businesses, and who did we have? We had Microsoft, we had OpenAI, Google, Amazon, all the big boys were there.
Yeah, big companies.
It wasn't massively covered, or it's really surprised me.
Yeah, I'm not too sure why it wasn't, because I didn't really hear about it until I read the newsletter. That's not a plug, by the way.
It is a plug.
I think countries and companies are a bit reticent. I think they're a bit worried about putting their name out there and tying themselves back to AI in case anything goes wrong, because AI is very based on stipulation. And I think because it's a phenomenon which people aren't truly versed or don't truly understand, it's quite difficult to cover. And you don't want to be on the wrong end of the stick when something happens, right? Because you can't predict what's going to happen with AI.
Yeah, but we are we're there, aren't we? We're there with Japan and Canada.
It was co-hosted by the UK. I didn't realise it was actually co-hosted by the UK.
So, to me, it's a good thing. We're trying to say, look, we have to do something about it, and that they've agreed this what they're calling the very first international network for AI safety. So I can't see any downside, and the fact that it wasn't hugely covered, I don't know if that's the start of the bubble, the AI bubble, hype bubble being bursted. There's so much about it, or do you think because it's the less sexy stuff, we're talking about regulations rather than the latest tool, that's why it wasn't covered? I think maybe that might be the reason.
Well, I think they started to cover AI safety in a lot more depth. But I think the issue that people have is that the commitments are still voluntary, and that might not be enough. Whereas if there was some form of obligation or more of a commitment, a bit like how the UK put the 8.5 million grant for innovating AI safety, I think that's one concern that people might have. And equally with AI safety, a lot of people don't truly know what that entails. So the Anthropic co-founder, I think it was Jack Clark, mentioned that when he was at the summit, and he was asking people what they thought of the summit and what they were going to look into and what AI safety meant. And a lot of them had different answers. So I think on that basis alone, it kind of shows that, people are thinking about the safety associated with AI, but also no one's got a conversion or kind of a consensus of what that truly means. And I think that if you don't have that collective focus, you might end up going on different tangents and not meeting an end goal.
Yeah, and also we should, the countries that were there were typically the sort of the Western countries. There was no representation from China. There's no sort of Russia. There's no. So if we want a truly international set of standards, it has to be global. And whilst this is a step in the right direction, it's not fully global, because if everyone at this summit basically says, this is what we're going to do, so the fear is sort of less nice players, let's say, may take advantage of that situation and move faster, further ahead, and give themselves an advantage. So it's a very fine line, Yoshi.
And just on that point as well, the issue, I think, with a lot of these global developments, yes, I think that AI regulation should be at a global level, at this sort of level. However, it will take a lot longer for policies and regulations and frameworks to be put in place to find a consensus, because it's at such a big scale. And the issue with that is that the technology advances and develops so quickly that once you come to a consensus and you actually speak and release some form of framework or policy or regulation, the technology has already moved on.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think, especially with road technology and people who have kind of not the best interests at heart, so I think there's an issue with how you actually implement some of these frameworks
Well, it has to be
or
future-proof.
governance.
It's a bit like when you're talking about data literacy and stuff. You've got to make sure that you've got a framework in place, a foundations that um, can take account of any future developments. Because you're right, the last thing you want is to, how long these things take to kind of take force, and then it's immediately out of date. So it's a good point, but I still see it as a positive thing, and
Yes.
I've tried to link it to the PDA task force and what the IPA did with a recent government paper. All these things together are providing some kind of endorsement to people that this is a safe place to tread.
Yes.
It's got some kind of regulations, what they're calling network for AI safety around it. So, I'm supportive of it. I'm just very surprised it wasn't covered more in the UK press, and I wonder if that is the first sign of the what they call the trough of disillusionment after
Yes.
the hype cycle we've had. Anyway, the other thing we wanted to talk about was this graph that came out. I can't remember what the source is exactly, but we put it in the newsletter, which was looking at the frequent users of Gen AI are much more likely to feel trust and excitement than uncertainty about technology. Basically, it's what it's saying is if you dive in and have a go, you're going to start feeling more trustly. And I think that's true. The people that I talk to anecdotally about this, it's always the ones who haven't used it who seem to be like, well, I don't want to touch that stuff. But I think once you get into it, it's you do start feeling a bit more hopeful because you can see the direction it's going. What did you make of these results?
So the thing that I've been reading a lot, maybe in the last few years, especially from a product standpoint, is a lot of companies are pivoting to being product led. So in terms of product led growth, so they're giving people free trials to use their software or their products, and they're seeing a lot more uptake in subscribers, right? Or people actually purchasing their software.
Yeah.
And you can see that here. I think you kind of take this out of that commercial aspect and say, okay, if you lower accessibility or make it easier for people to access some of these products and solutions, a bit like what OpenAI have done with ChatGPT recently with 4.0 or 4 Omni, you'll get a higher rate of adoption. And in people just using the software, just using some of these products, they're able to actually see what they like, what they don't like. But the most important thing is that they get clarity in terms of what they're using and why they're using it. They develop their own purposes, their own use cases, and that then helps them understand a bit more about what they're getting into.
Yeah.
Hence, there's more excitement and less uncertainty.
Yeah, you're so right. That's exactly it. But it was quite interesting. It looked like so they divided this group up between millennials and Gen Z, and that millennials seem to be
Yeah.
slightly more slightly more excitement. So that 37% of millennials were at excitement, whereas 30% of Gen Z, 36% of millennials trusted it, whereas 31% of Gen Z. That surprised me a bit because I thought the younger generation would have been, more, those figures would have been higher for them.
Yeah, but an interesting point here actually is looking at some of the age of some of these millennials at the time. A lot of them will be in workplaces, so I think they'll be using it for different use cases as what some people in Gen Z might be using it for as well. And I think they might be more trusting because of that. Maybe, I
Yeah.
don't know.
And maybe it's because they're native to it. This is no big surprise. So they come in with a little bit more skepticism, like the other
Yes.
side, just not the kind of baby boomer kind of skepticism, as in, you know, I've done something a certain way my whole career, I'm not going to change it now. It's more they're the TikTok generation who are kind of questioning everything. Everything's a conspiracy theory type of thing. So they're just some really interesting stats. But I thought it was kind of backs up what I kind of felt. I like it when I see a study, and we all do, don't we? It backs up our gut feeling. I try to just ignore the ones that don't.
Yeah, confirmation bias, right? You look for what you
Confirmation
want to look
bias.
for.
Exactly that. Exactly that. So again, that's in the newsletter. I want to turn now to Mr. Musk, who's made some waves again, hasn't he, Yoshi? I think if I just play this video for people, it was quite interesting. It's only sort of 20, 30 seconds, but what was the conference he was at?
This was the Viva Tech Conference, 24th of May.
So have a listen to this. I'm going to share my screen quickly. Here he is, Mr. Musk in all his glory.
I do think that long term, in a benign scenario, any job that somebody does will be optional. Like if you want to do a job as kind of like a hobby, you do a job, but otherwise the AI and the robots will provide any goods and services that you want.
I mean, that's he likes saying his controversial things, so you've got to take everything he says with a little pinch of salt. But what he's basically saying there is we're moving to this kind of universal credit system where the AI robots will be doing most of our tasks, and if we want to work, we can do as a kind of hobby. I mean, is that utopia or is that hell?
Is utopian, but I also think whether or not that will happen, it won't be in the near future. I
No.
think is the main
He says
thing.
long term, doesn't he? And what
He
does
does
long
say long
term mean?
term.
And he's probably right. Long term, 100 years. I'm sure we'll get to that point where we'll be doing, very, very, very little, and robots will be doing most of our stuff. But I suppose you could look at it the other way. If you go back 50 years and you said to people then that we'd have all these devices, we'll have the world's knowledge at our fingertips, we'll have the entire collection of world music in a tiny little device we put in our pocket, and that we've got dishwashers and we've got drones who do our gardening for us, they would have seen that as utopia, right? So it's all relative.
Yes, that's very true. And this actually follows a video that I saw recently of Elon Musk, and he said, "Why do we always focus on solving challenges?" And he said, rather than focusing on challenges, always look for opportunities, right? And I think this is kind of a positive spin on the advancement of AI, right? So people are scared they're losing jobs, there's fear that they might be displaced. But he's saying, well, hold on a minute. There could be a possibility where we don't need to work and AIs can do the jobs for us. So he does add that positive spin into this. But just looking at some of the implications of what he said, that in long term, there will need to be some review of economic and kind of economic models and social policies. I mean, they mentioned universal basic income, how that would work. There'll be people changing their role. There'll be targeted reskilling. There'll be a need for wealth redistribution. So there's so many different implications of what he said. And I
And
think,
let's
yeah, there'll need
face
to be
it,
some
I
form of
mean,
change.
this is a long way off. The world is a mess right now. I mean, we still got starvation, we still got climate problems, we still got wars going on. We've got some serious problems to solve before we even get to that point. But having said that, he's clearly a visionary, all the stuff he does, and I think he's just trying to push the boundary, and he's obviously trying to be a little bit controversial. That's what he does, and he wants people talking, which is exactly what we're doing, and thinking
Yes.
about the possibility that we could start moving into this realm. Now, I still believe that project delivery of various kinds, whether that's an IT project or a new skyscraper, is going to be one of the hardest things to solve, because it very much still depends on human communication. It still very much depends on those kind of relationships that we build, and I think we're way off AI getting to that stage.
This is kind of where Microsoft's Teams Copilot and autonomous agents almost do fit into the picture of what he's painting in regards to autonomous AI agents in delivering projects. And they actually use the word project management. We'll come into that in a second.
Well, let's get on to that now. I mean, we wanted to talk about the Microsoft build. Do you just want to do a summary for the listeners? What were the major sort of takeaways?
Yeah, so let's just get some of this stuff up. And I will be using the newsletter slightly here.
It's definitely been announcement season, hasn't it? I mean, I'm sure we're going to have a podcast at some point in a few weeks where we'll say it's been a slow story week, but we haven't had it yet.
Yeah. So this is everything from Microsoft Build 2024. And I won't focus on everything to do with developments or Azure and cloud, but I will focus on the autonomous agents and also Microsoft Copilot within Teams. So within Copilot and AI, Microsoft is expanding with new autonomous agent capabilities that can proactively respond to data and events to manage complex business processes independently. Okay. Team Copilot is being introduced as an expansion of Copilot to act as a meeting facilitator, collaborator, and project manager in Microsoft Teams.
It actually uses that word, project manager.
Yeah, and then when it comes to autonomous agents themselves, with their autonomous agents, like I mentioned, it's effectively a virtual worker. But Microsoft Copilot Studio, an extension of that, now allows you to create copilots that can act as an independent agent triggered by events rather than just conversations. These agents can automate complex, long-running business processes with more autonomy, orchestrating tasks over days. So when you use things like ChatGPT, there's an interface and you have to engage with the AI and you'll get a certain response back. It's conversational. this step that Microsoft have taken with autonomous agents is that they can act independently and be triggered by various events outside of your
Does that mean
conversation.
they'll be making decisions? I mean,
Basically, yes.
so that's that. I think that's going to be a big red flag to some people, because
Yes.
I think some people were cool with AI as long as we were controlling it. But if we're saying that we've got this situation where Copilot is going to start making decisions, that's a big step.
Yeah, so there's two big points here. Is one, that they are able to work autonomously, and like I mentioned before, they become synonymous with a project or a task. They can work off their own accord. They can make decisions. Now, there can be a human in the loop to intervene and mitigate any wrongdoing, but that is something that's the next step to agency, effectively, with AI. But the other interesting thing they've mentioned here is that AutoGen, as part of the developments, is a framework that enables building multi-agent large language applications where multiple agents can converse with each other to achieve and accomplish tasks. So you can effectively have two agents which can communicate with each other to divide tasks, complete goals, and assign work to different agents. So you can create a team. It's not just a single AI where you get
This reminds me, I think it was about not long after ChatGPT came out, there was this thing that came out called AutoGPT. Do you remember it? I think it was kind of a framework, and it was on it was on Hugging Face, something like that. But it basically did that. You set it a goal, and it spawned out separate agents that would go off, and it would talk to each other, and it would keep going. And I remember it had this something called danger mode, where you basically said keep going until you complete the task. Now, it sounds like Microsoft are bringing that to the mainstream. I'm all for this stuff, but we never want to get to the point where we say to an agent, keep going until you complete the task, because we are getting into, because what limits are you imposing on it? Are you saying you complete this project no matter what? And does that mean that doesn't matter if you do something unethical, or if you breach health and safety standards? You end up in a minefield, I think, where you're saying, right, we've got to put some guardrails on what this AI is able to do.
Yes, and so for me, successful implementation will be something which is where you have a clear AI strategy, you have strong data governance, you've upskilled those who are using or leveraging the AI. But like I mentioned, this is kind of following what Google have done. They're embedding AI within a lot of their software and products, so you end up using it by default. And the integration with it within Teams is also really important, because it can step into your calls, it can step into different conversations you're having. The one thing that I really liked about this is that the AI autonomous agents will have contextual memory. So they're able to keep information and then answer certain business questions or anything you're doing within a project within that context. So it really will feel like there's another worker within your team
with an incredibly good memory.
With an incredibly good memory, but you have to manage and govern it more effectively. So I think it will put humans more into a managerial position.
So what this Teams Copilot, what we really want, let's say on project delivery, you want a Teams Copilot for the project, because if we've all got our separate siloed Teams Copilots, that's not going to help the project. But actually, if you took the plunge, and this goes back to stuff that we talked about, 2 decades ago with Latham and Egan reports back when I was a kid, around working together in partnership. But actually, we can almost put some of those principles to proper test now by creating a project Copilot, which remembers everything. So you don't have to go, because that is the biggest problems in projects. They go on for a long, long time, even a sort of medium-sized projects will be a few years. And you forget things, and all that information just kind of evaporates. If we can use this Teams Copilot in a project environment to be a kind of wrapper around the project, because people come and go, but it's still going to remember what those people did when they come and go. It's going to remember what was agreed at various stages of a project. I mean, that I can see as a huge positive to project delivery.
Yeah, and within product delivery, so I was kind of probing into some of the things that the Team Copilot can help with, because Teams Copilot sits within Teams. Autonomous agents can sit beyond that. They can sit across many different workflows. But yeah, creating, assigning tasks, the ones that you typically think of. But it's also that, let's say you have a product, for instance, and you need to develop a go-to-market strategy. These autonomous agents can develop you a plan. They won't just tell you what to develop in terms of your go-to-market plan. They'll develop it for you. They'll set out step-by-step kind of waterfall-based project planning or agile-based project planning. So it can do all these things for you. It can track progress. It can also give you some insight into resource allocation and when you should push tasks back. So balancing team workloads, facilitating meetings, generating ad hoc reports on things that you focus on. Now, take this one step beyond. You combine this with the ChatGPT data analysis aspect as well. You're tying in reporting. So this whole ecosystem now that Microsoft are building, Google are building, and other competitors are building with some of these leading frontier models, is that you are starting to work within an ecosystem which is not a one-stop shop like ChatGPT initially was. It's something which is integrated in everything you do, and you will start to use it by default.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? If I was a client now, I would say, if I'm starting a project, I would insist that these tools are used for the good of the project, not as separate company. And that's a take I think be worth exploring. What is the appetite for creating project agents for the good of a project, and the multiple parties use it? Anyway, you did mention something else there. So that lots came out of Microsoft Build, but we did cover the whole ChatGPT release last week, but there was a feature that we didn't really have a chance to dive into, and I have now. You just mentioned it, was the ChatGPT data analysis. ChatGPT's been able to, upload CSVs and Excel sheets for a while now, but it's been relatively good. I've used it, but not sort of mind blowing. But this new feature, and I've been playing it for a while now. And there's some people saying this is going to replace Excel for some people, because you can effectively have a conversation with your Excel workbook now and get it to change things for you in real time on the fly. You can give it complex queries such as predictive analysis, prioritizing data points, detecting anomalies. And I've tried this myself on some personal data, and it is amazing. Basically, you can do it, and then you can spawn out a report with loads of different graphs, and the graphs can be real-time graphs, not static graphs.
Yep.
I was really impressed with it. Have you had a chance to play with it?
I did. I struggled to get it to edit my files live. When it would edit the files that I used, I did use the conversation interface to make some amendments. But when it didn't save the file live, it had to then give me an export. I don't know if because I was using it wrong and my prompting isn't the best. But it is still impressive. So like you mentioned, there's context in the analysis. So it actually will give you context in terms of what you're looking for. So if that's financial forecasting, for instance, it will give you relevant terminology. And like you mentioned as well, Jack, which I think is really important with data analysis, is bigger documentation and a longer thread of interaction. Because when you're analyzing a file, you'll be going back and forth, right? To really probe and understand what's happening in the data. And because that's now bigger, you can have a longer thread of information, which means you can squeeze a lot more output from that conversation. But the one thing that I would say, and this is when I've used it, and I've also seen examples of this on the internet, is the AI model still spits out a lot of its thought process to you. And sometimes when you want to get an answer from an Excel sheet or a report, you want to get the answer as quickly as possible. But what ChatGPT currently does is it works out its thought process, effectively what people refer to now as the internal monologue.
You can tell it not to do that.
Yeah, and that will make the outputs you get a lot more direct. Some people might want the context, see how they've worked it out, see if it's true, if you want to quality assure. But I am majorly impressed. In fact, I was looking at one trending article, and it was from University of Chicago, and they found that GPT-4 can predict future earnings of growth and accuracy in comparison to human analysts. So there was GPT-4 achieved 60% accuracy in predicting the direction of future earnings, higher than the 53 or 57% range of human analysts. So the analytics capability is getting stronger and stronger. And it's really hard to push it aside at this point.
Well, funny enough, I was reading a book, I think you read it yourself, called Noise, where it talks about, the likelihood of experts, whatever those experts might be. Even at that point, the machines were a better bet. And now we're moving to another realm with this kind of stuff. What I loved about it, I loved the fact that you could kind of go to a cell or a row. You don't need to, you just say, update this row or what, just by literally pointing at it. So I think it's going to change the way that we deal with things. And I think it's going to, as normal, it's going to come through with the kids. The kids will start using this instead of Excel, and it will start becoming the norm. But just from a project delivery perspective, imagine, some of those tasks we have to do, like tender analysis, where you get sort of 3 or 4 tenders back, spend ages trying to analyze this. With this, you could just upload these to this data analysis tool and then just start having a conversation with it.
And you get a multitude of graphs, right? So you're getting line graphs, bar charts, and you're also getting the predictive analytics. You can get into a lot, like you mentioned, more complex queries. You're getting into predictive analytics, right? And what the analysis can also do is not just give you an analysis from what you've given it. It can help to prioritize where are the key points. What are the key independent variables? What are the key dependent variables? It can give you that context. So you're not just looking at data and insights. You're understanding the context of the information that it's giving you.
Yeah, exactly. You can talk to it like a human being. Well, where did you get that from? We've all done it where we sat there scratching our heads with an Excel spreadsheet saying, I don't understand why it's spewed out that answer. Now you just ask it and it will tell you exactly why. So it's cool. And the other cool thing, because it's based on this new model, the ChatGPT-4 Omni, super fast in the response. I find that's made a big difference to my workflow. I used to have to sit there, you kind of press the button. I mean, it shows how kind of spoiled we are that you start moaning about the fact that ChatGPT-4, you have to sit there and wait for a response. But I was getting to that point where I was getting impatient sometimes for waiting for a response to kind of come. And now, it's almost instant. It's amazing. And it speeds the whole thing up.
The improvement in latency looks like a minor detail, but it has such a huge impact.
It does. It really does. I mean, that's the thing that's, those kind of tasks where you think to yourself before, oh, well, I won't use ChatGPT for that because actually it's just quicker for me to do it myself. You don't even have that anymore because this, 4.0 is super fast. But let's move on to a couple of stories in the industry. There was one on the newsletter around sustainability targets and ESG incentives. It found that 33% of contractors rate their ability to operate a sustainable job site across projects as good. And then another 17% said it was very good and 10% rated it as excellent. So what did you think of this study?
Yes, I think we're starting to see. There is a big shift towards the construction industry trying to meet sustainability targets. We know that. And a lot of companies are starting to use AI-powered software to achieve those targets. Now, this research itself found that there was a 60-40 split, right? Yeah. And that was similar to those who were using construction software for meeting some of these targets and those who weren't. But like I mentioned, within the industry, we're starting to see AI-powered solutions for meeting these targets in optimizing building design, enhancing construction processes, right? So predicting performance of different methods and materials, tracking sustainability all the way through to waste, enabling smart cities, supporting green building management for asset management, all these purposes. We're seeing it more and more. But I still think there's a long way to go for people to actually adopt and utilize these solutions more effectively as to how they should be used. I think that's one thing. But one thing I want to touch on as well, I know I keep saying this, is that yes, within the construction industry, we're looking to meet these targets, right, to drive down carbon emissions and effectively deliver construction in a greener way. However, you look at this on a larger scale and you look at what Microsoft have been doing recently. So they made a pledge in 2020, which was to cut down their carbon emissions. Mm-hmm. However, because of the AI race and the need to develop advanced AI, energy, I think it was here somewhere, that their carbon footprint has increased by 30% higher.
Yeah, I saw that one.
So you're reducing carbon emissions in one area, but it's bolstering in another. So it's this distribution as to how we're tackling sustainability as a trade-off, is what it seems like.
Yeah, but the thing is that short term? Because I heard the CEO of NVIDIA talk about this as well, in that at the moment we're just chucking more and more kind of compute at the problem, like traditional compute. And obviously that's just greater volume of CPUs and greater volume of compute, which is leading to this increased greenhouse emissions. But I think the future is going to be, when we get to the point of quantum computers and stuff like that, and kind of the next generation, all these new AI chips, actually that will start kind of leveling off.
Yeah, and you're hoping so, because I mean, for some context, right, it mentions training a single large AI model can emit over 626,000 pounds of CO2, nearly 5 times the lifetime emissions of an average car. So with a lot of these kind of focuses on to reduce carbon, we need to see it across. It needs to be a multi-industry thing. And if some of these big tech companies like NVIDIA with their chips can optimize how we deliver advanced AI capability without significantly increasing carbon, I think that would be a big win.
But it's a bit like the whole large language model thing. The large language models came out, and then the next thing is people are trying to make them smaller for various reasons, whether that's security or whether that's portability. So you've got these small language models. I think it's going to be this similar. At the moment, we don't have any choice, but I think the new modern chips that are coming out, what NVIDIA's working on, and the move to quantum computing, that will hopefully change us. And it's almost like chicken and egg, isn't it? You've got to kind of invent the AI. You've got to get you got to get as close as possible to AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, that kind of human level intelligence. And you've got to spend your greenhouse, your gas emissions and your carbon kind of trade-off on that to get to the point that the AI will then be able to produce solutions for the world's problems that will start offsetting that. So it's like you've almost got to invest. I know that's not very palatable for a lot of people, but I don't think the answer is saying, right, let's stop AI because it's using this. Because actually, let's push it. Let's go. If we everyone's talking about 2030 as being the kind of the supposed time we're going to get close to AGI. Well, look, if we push this for another 6 years, in 6 years' time, the AI might be developing chips that are more powerful. They might be helping to develop solutions to the world's carbon problems, and then the payoff will begin, right?
Yeah, so I think it's loosely related to things like economies of scale, right? As well, is the more investment you put in something with the units you have, eventually it becomes cheaper to actually run and operate. So I think that will be a similar picture with AI. And also for construction, I think the trade-off is the right trade-off. I think there's a need to improve sustainability to deliver more viable projects now. So I think it's again, that is the right decision to take.
Yeah, well, we can't stop doing projects. What we've got to do is work out how we can do projects more economically and reduce the carbon emissions. But the way to do that is through AI, whether it's generative design, whether it's, reducing on-site wastage. I think we're both passionate about this. We believe that AI is going to help the industry, notwithstanding all the safeguarding, all the things that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. That all needs to happen. And I'm not saying this is without danger, but if we really want to solve not just the construction industry or the project delivery profession's problems, but actually the world's problems, AI can be an answer. Obviously, there's lots of ways that could go wrong. Like with all technology, it can be used for good and it can be used for bad. And we do need to be careful about how we tread on this path. And I think the next 6 years, and I start saying 6 years now, Yoshi, because I do believe that this 2030 is going to be quite a pivotal moment. I don't think the answer is to say, let's just stop, and I don't think we can, no one's going to be able to say that now. But I'm optimistic that it's going to solve some of these problems in the long term. But let's move on. We've got a few minutes left, and I just wanted to talk about something else, which is not strictly AI, but I think it's quite important with what's happening in the world at the moment. We've got the US election coming down the line just after the UK election. So there's going to be a lot of changes in the world. One, Mr. Donald Trump, who I believe is now the favourite to be the US president, the leader of the free world, as it were. He's now come out in support of cryptocurrency, whereas before he used to be a vocal critic. Now, the reason why I wanted to raise this is because I still believe that cryptocurrency or blockchain and the whole kind of platform that it works on can go hand in hand with AI to really kind of boost that technology. And the thing that's been holding it back, even though the UK has been quite kind of bullish around blockchain and other countries have, the US haven't been. They haven't been. And that's been a big thing holding it back. But he's now come out in this public statement, and I'm sure it's a little bit about, trying to get his votes up and what have you. But he's posted it on his Truth Social media that he's basically saying to people who are in that world, and that's a very early word, the blockchain and crypto world, I've got your back. So the reason I want, is this going to change the way that AI, let's say Trump gets in and he sticks to this pledge and he's going to start really pushing and driving for the legitimization of blockchain in the industry. Is that going to push AI companies to start being more confident to introduce blockchain and crypto into the way that they deal with things?
Yeah, I think it's also vice versa. I think from a standpoint with AI, we know that it's been used within the financial industry to detect and prevent fraudulent activities.
Yeah.
And this is something which also happens within Bitcoin. So within cryptocurrency and blockchain and some of these similar technologies, is that you have an exchange of information, right, and digital assets. And what AI can do is support the detection of fraudulent activities within that space. So they kind of do go hand in hand. And then you can achieve safeguarding of digital assets from cyber attacks and hacking attempts, but also at a standpoint of bot-to-bot payments, right? So you have AI interacting with each other to actually enable some of these blockchain-based payments, tokenized assets, and also cryptocurrency. So I think they will work here hand in hand. And I think that's a positive because you're looking at security from that standpoint.
And for anyone listening, I really think it's important to get your head around crypto and blockchain. I know it got a bit of a bad rap for a while, but I don't think this technology is going away, and it works so seamlessly with what AI is trying to do. Because when we get to this point of autonomous agents and allowing these autonomous agents to do things, when we feel that's safe enough to do, and I know there's a whole debate about whether we're ready for that, you are going to need a platform like blockchain to enable those decisions to be recorded. That's why I think this announcement was quite important, because you wouldn't let your AI agent have access to your Santander account, but you might let it have access to your Bitcoin wallet or to your... And, there was another big announcement as well, which was the Ethereum ETF, which basically has legitimized Ethereum. And for those who don't know, Ethereum's kind of the what a lot of the NFTs and things, it's the blockchain that a lot of the DeFi and the NFTs are built upon, so those non-fungible tokens. So we've had two big pieces of news, and I thought it was very worth bringing it into this podcast, because I think people who have got any kind of excitement about AI need to understand that these go hand in hand with things like Bitcoin, things like VR and AR. All these technologies are going to work together to sort of transform what we're doing. They don't stand in a silo, do they?
No, and exactly. And I think that connection is what makes these technologies so powerful. I think with blockchain and cryptocurrency, especially blockchain, I think unlike AI, I think people struggle to actually find a use case for it. I think that's a big blocker with AI. Again, it's there to help you generate ideas, understand use cases. So it's all completely synergistic.
Yeah.
And it feeds forward to what I liked about Trump was what you mentioned, is that he said, he'll live with it one way or the other. So it gets to a certain point where you start to push these things away, but they keep coming back, and you just have to accept that's the way, that's the macro trend, right? That's the way the world's moving in that direction.
Yeah. Not a lot of people say the word like and Donald Trump in the same sentence, or at least they don't admit it. But it's going to be interesting to see if he gets a second term. But for anyone who is interested in the whole Bitcoin and blockchain world, we'll put in the show notes. There's a very good podcast that I listen to called Milk Road. So we'll put that in the show notes. And you if you just want to learn a bit more about it, that's the place to go. But I think we've covered most of the big stories there. So we're going to call it a night there, I think. And next week we'll be back with another guest. But any last words from you, Yoshi?
No, surprisingly, no, nothing else from me. I mean, it was interesting to see the OpenAI deal with journalism and how that will impact how information is spread across the internet. We haven't got time to cover it in this podcast, maybe the next. But there's, like I said, we always say this, there's so much going on. We try to pick out the key topic that we find interesting and hopefully that others find interesting. But the world's your oyster, right? There's so much information out there.
And you're so, people listening, we're still early. This is still early to this game. I just keep saying, dive in, be interested, find out, read as much as you can about it. Listen to the podcast as well as this one. There's loads of other good ones, because you are early. If you've got an interest in it now, you can start building your knowledge up. And then, by the time we get to that sort of 2030 date, you can really utilize this to improve whatever it is you're doing, your business or your career or whatever it may be.
And like the graph said, right, be product-led growth. Try it out, and then you'll see that the excitement will grow, and the lack of clarity will also go. you'd have a better understanding.
And on that note, we'll call it a night. So see you next week, everyone. Take care.